Inspecting elements using cssSelector. Okay, so cssSelector and XPaths are actually very different. We have a lot of flexibility with them, and we have to actually write them a little bit differently. Okay, they're a little bit more complicated than the other locators. Okay, but we use them the most because a lot of elements on modern applications today are actually very tricky to locate, and we're able to locate them either by using cssSelectors or XPaths. But let's talk about cssSelectors. There are many ways you can actually write a cssSelector. If you go on Google and you look up how to write a cssSelector, to locate elements, you will see a lot of options. Okay, a lot of different ways. But two common ways here is by using the hash sign and then the attribute value of ID. So let's go ahead and try this one out first to see how it works. Okay, so let's go back to VS Code. In the previous video, we wrote some code to click on that forgot password link. I'm gonna go ahead and comment this out. Okay, and we were at some point sending the username and then sending the password to the password text box. I'm gonna go ahead and comment this again with the password text box, or sending the password to the password text box, and I want to send the password by using a cssSelector this time. Okay, so I'll do driver dot find element by dot cssSelector, and then here let's try method number 1, which is the hash sign. Okay, so let's go ahead and enter the hash sign here, and then the attribute value of the ID attribute. Okay, so let's go to our web page here. Okay, so let's inspect the password text box. Okay, and let's look for the attribute value of ID attribute, which is form password. Okay, let's go ahead and copy this. Okay, let's go back to VS Code, and I'm going to go ahead and paste this here, and then afterwards I'll do dot send keys, and then I'll go ahead and enter 1 2 3 4 5 6. Okay, just like this. All right, so here I'm expecting Selenium to send password 1 2 3 4 5 6 by using a cssSelector, and this is one way we wrote it. So let's go ahead and run this program and let's see what happens. Okay, so Chrome browser instantiates, the username gets sent, and you saw that the password gets sent. So this is method 1 of writing a cssSelector and using it to locate an element. Okay, so that's method number 1. Let's go ahead and write this down. So locating using cssSelector. Okay, like this. I'm gonna say locator method. You know what? I'm just gonna write here hash, and I'm gonna say attribute value of ID. Okay, these notes are just here for your reference. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and comment this out because I'm going to try method number 2. Okay, and I actually want to revisit the concept of the compound class name, where we couldn't use it because Selenium does not interact with compound class names for the class name attribute. Okay, so now if we go back to our Sublime text here, this is method number 2. Okay, so open bracket attribute, and then the assignment operator, or the equal sign in this case, and then single quotes, but also double quotes would also work as well. I'll explain why you should avoid this. Okay, but this would also work. So I'm going to replace this with single quotes. And then here we need to insert the attribute value of whatever attribute we're locating here. Okay, so let's try to use that class and that compound class name. Okay, so let's go back to VS Code, and now let's do driver dot find element by dot cssSelector. Okay, and then here I'm going to go ahead and write just that. Okay, so you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and copy this. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and paste this here, just like this. The attribute name that we want to use is going to be class. Okay, so that's going to be class, and I'm going to go ahead and type in class like this, and the attribute value. So I'm going to go back to our page, and I'm going to copy this right here. Okay, this is the attribute value to the class attribute. Okay, before it wouldn't work using class name, but let's see if this works. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and paste this here, and then we want to dot send keys, and we want to send 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write this out. Go ahead and write this code out. The statement is a little long, which is why I like storing these elements in a web element type. Okay, but this, again, we're just practicing now. Okay, so this is one whole statement here. I'm going to go ahead and run it. What I'm expecting Selenium to do is to send this password to the password text box using this CSS selector that's using the class attribute and the compound class name. Okay, so let's go ahead and run it and let's see what happens. So I'm going to go ahead and run it. Chrome browser opens, username and password. There you go. It worked. So this is evidence that we can use a compound class name, but only with cssSelector and also an XPath, but we'll get there. Okay, so these are the two most common ways to locate using cssSelector. Okay, now you can write, again, you can write a CSS selector in many different ways. You can go ahead and Google and do more research, but I would say just pick like 1 or 2 ways and just memorize them by heart. Okay, now let's come back here and let's write some notes down here. Okay, so I'll say locating using CSS selector. Okay, I'm going to say locator method, and I'm just going to write this syntax here just for your notes here. And I'm going to paste it here. Now, I actually want to show you something now, and I may as well just show you now. I'm going to talk about this again when we talk about XPaths. But remember when I mentioned that double quotes would work as well. Okay, so if we do this, let me go ahead and actually, let me go ahead and change the single quotes here to double quotes. Okay, so you see here we have a single quote here, and then we have a single quote right here as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and replace this with a double quotes, and then this with the double quotes as well. Okay, so you see this issue we have here. It's not working. So with VS Code, it wouldn't work. Okay, now let me go back and actually copy this and paste it inside the string. Let's see what happens. Okay, and actually let me just change these single quotes to double quotes right here, double quotations, and I'm going to copy this and paste it here. Let's see what happens when I paste this inside a string. Okay, so I paste it and it doesn't work. Okay, now if you're using IntelliJ or Eclipse, it may work. It would, but you'll see that Eclipse or IntelliJ will try to use some control characters to break the string, because in Java you cannot paste a string inside a string. Okay, so it's best practice when you're writing a CSS selector or even an XPath to just store your attribute values, okay, in single quotes like this, because this is already a string right here. Okay, so anyway, that's just a fun fact there for using CSS selector. Anyway, go ahead and write this code out. In the next video, we'll talk about XPaths.